Hello, Cohasset, and welcome to another edition of Our Town. I'm Mark DeGiacomo, and I'll be hosting tonight all by myself. Pat is off. Tonight, my guest is Acting Town Manager Mike Milanoski. Mike, welcome back to the show.
Thank you for having me again.
So, Mike, we have a town meeting coming up, a special town meeting on November 23rd. I've got the draft warrant here up at the high school. Back me up a little, because my understanding was at some point you had announced that there was no need for a special town meeting and we weren't going to have one, which was the first time in a long time, so far back as I can remember. But then we came into some money, was that it? And now we're having a town meeting. Give us a little background on that.
That's correct. I mean, I did recommend when we put our budget together, our FY14 budget back in December of this year, almost a year ago at this time, one of the goals in the budget was to develop a budget that you would not have to come back and have a fix-it meeting. Because so many years Cohasset has had as part of their fall special town meeting in the fall, it's usually to come back and balance the budget. You have some free cash that you can put into a department, so it's in the black at that point, or late bills that were coming in, etc. So when we put the budget together through doing sound budget planning principles, we were able to develop a budget that would not need a town meeting. Not to say that there wasn't going to be one, but from a financial budgeting standpoint, our FY14 budget was designed that we don't need a fix-it budget.
And FY14 starts what, July 1st, 2013?
That's correct.
Okay.
That's correct. It goes into the following year. So that has been true, and I've been saying that for a while. There were other people who says, well, we have to have a special town meeting because we've always had one. And my philosophy was like, fine, have one, but it's not because of financial mismanagement or financial issues that you need to solve it on it from a negative standpoint. Long story short is when we got our free cash certified, our free cash is our in essence kind of like retained earning. If you were in a private sector, it'd be your profits. After you've looked at your balance sheet and paid off all your bills and liabilities, here's what excess you have. When that was all done, we had about $1.3 million in additional free cash that got certified in September.
Big surprise.
Well, it wasn't necessarily a big surprise. It was a surprise, and I'll get into that in a second, was that we did get some additional revenue coming in from additional taxes that we were able to collect for older taxes. But there was a lot of, there were three components to it. One is that we had about $300,000 in returns, if you will. Money that departments didn't need to finish their budget out. And that's what we've been doing, is if you don't need the money, don't spend it. A new philosophy in town. There was about $300,000 there. The remaining funds came from some additional state money that came in that we didn't budget for, and also additional tax revenue, and also fees that came in. So that was about $1.3 million. A companion document to that was when we put together our recap sheet. We also had the state come out with an additional $460-some thousand this fiscal year in our budget that was not planned. So now all of a sudden we have a stable budget. We're able to go through all FY14, but now we've got, in addition to the 1.3, we now have over $400,000 in additional state aid, plus another 100 and some that we're going to collect in local receipts, for a total of $600,000. So now, good things are happening. We've got $1.9 million of surplus revenue that was not anticipated in the budgeting process.
Was this cherry sheet? Is that what you're talking about? There was increases in that, or?
Yes, it was increased about $400 and some odd thousand from the state in our cherry sheet.
Okay. A
lot of that went to Chapter 70, which is what the government was doing. But again, we passed our budget in April of 2013. This past April is when we had our annual town meeting. The state legislature, they didn't pass their budget until July. So, we have to, anticipate what they're going to do and be conservative with all budget forecasts. And all of a sudden, they beat all expectations and we're able to give more money back to the communities. So what we have to do as part of that is there's two components. One is that we need to program that additional revenue within our budget. The town meeting passed financial management policies at the annual town meeting in 2012, following the selectmen that also approved them that year. And that really becomes our guiding document for how we do financial management in this town. And so this 1.3 plus $600,000 of putting those back into the system is what those policies speak to.
So if the money hadn't been quite as much, we would not be going forward on this Article 1 and how to disperse it? Or was it just that it was so much? I mean, you expected some surplus, I assume, but what was the tipping point?
We expected some surplus. It was the $600,000 because the $600,000 is in FY14 money. So that $600,000 has to be added to the budget. We have to create an expense line item for that so that that can be programmed.
So if we didn't have this town meeting, we've got 1.9, you said, total?
Correct.
So if we didn't have this town meeting, what would happen?
What would happen is that we would have to come back and use something that I would not promote, which would be some fuzzy accounting, to basically lower our local receipts by $600,000, saying, we know we're going to get $600,000 more and probably even more beyond that, but we're going to lower them artificially just to show that we are able to go out and collect that 2.5%. The other 1.3 would have stayed in more lower interest bearing accounts.
Okay. So the decision was made, well, it was interesting because the selectmen didn't decide. This was a petition, citizens petition, that put Article 1 on the warrant, which kind of spreads out these funds, right?
Correct.
So what was going on there? Why didn't the selectmen decide to put this article on?
Good question. What I can speak to is when we had our free cash certified, our recap sheets done, and we're looking at where the finances are. I put forward a proposal to the selectmen starting in September that says, yes, we are going to have a special town meeting. Not for bad reasons, not to solve financial issues of the past. This is good news. This is excess money that we have, extra money coming in that we need to program into our FY14 budget and to be able to put into more interest-bearing accounts than we've had in the past. So I started that with those recommendations in September. When I made those recommendations, for whatever reason, some members on the Board of Selectmen that wanted to have a special town meeting says, no, we don't want to have a special town meeting right now. And there was discussion back and forth for a few weeks on whether to have one or not to have one. And then Paul Schubert took the initiative and went out and got 400 signatures to support the recommendations that came from the finance team to follow our financial management policies.
So the selectmen hadn't voted not to go forward. It was still in the discussion stage when the citizens petition came forward?
I will not say they had a vote, but there was no indication that they were going to have one. And what happens is you have to have the special town meeting before you set the tax rate so that the $600,000 can be properly allocated in that budget. We need to set the tax rate in December so we can get the tax bills out in January. So the time was running out.
Well, was the issue that the selectmen, well, the way the money, and we'll go over it in a second, the 1.9 is divided up in Article 1. That's exactly the way you wanted to have it divided up?
That's what I recommended in September, that's correct.
Okay, so was the issue with the selectmen that they wanted to distribute it differently than you, or that they just didn't want to have the town meeting?
They never took a vote on it, but from the meetings, it was just they didn't want to have a town meeting. They didn't see the need for having one now.
Okay. And again, if you didn't, we didn't need to have one, but we'd have to get involved in the fuzzy math that you're talking about. Nothing illegal, nothing wrong with it, but not best financial practices in your mind.
Exactly. It's not transparent. You're automatically deflating numbers, which you know are incorrect, and you're putting them into a budget which impacts your 5 and 10 year forecast. So why create a budget that isn't accurate? And what happens is the state was going to allow us to do this one-time fuzzy math adjustment. Normally they don't allow you to do that, which would have then reduced, we would not have been able to follow our management policies because we would have been collecting $600,000 less this year. We would have made it up in the future years, but it would have been $600,000 that would not have been collected this year.
Well,
and we have capital needs in this community. I mean, let's face it.
Well, you were there for the debates and so forth. So I'm just trying to understand, what was you've said that it wasn't so much that they didn't like the way you were going to distribute, it was that they didn't want the town meeting. I assume we're talking about the majority of the Board of Selectmen.
Mm-hmm.
So what was the basis? Why did they feel we don't need the town meeting? Was it just because you wanted one?
There was a lot of talk about unknown articles going forward, unknown citizens petitions going forward, and what those would be.
All right.
And that was brought out several times.
It's a concern that the town, once you open the warrant, you may get other articles in that people didn't want to see.
Correct.
As opposed to, we're against going forward and distributing these funds in some manner.
Correct.
Okay. All right, but in the final analysis, the article's on, the signatures have been certified. So the money is split up, just for folks watching, $600,000 the capital stabilization fund, $500,000 to the stabilization fund, little about $350 going to capital stabilization fund, $100,000 to the facilities stabilization fund, $250,000, $250,000 to the other post-employment benefits liability fund, and then $100,000 to DPW for road repairs. So these are numbers that you would come up with, and I understand you said that we passed guidelines and so forth, but I assume that there's some wiggle room in there. Why these certain amounts in these certain funds?
Sure. Following through with our financial management policies, we are required by town meeting, based upon these policies, to build up our stabilization fund to 5% of our operating budget, which is about $2 million. Going back a year and a half ago, we had a few $100,000 in there. After this annual town meeting, we have 1.5 in there. This additional 500,000 will give us a check that we've met one of the town meeting's financial objectives by having the $2 million in the stabilization fund. This is our rainy day account. This is the fund that that you tap into at last resort for unforeseen, unanticipated issues. This fund is critical also to our bond rating. It shows that we know how to manage our funds and we know how to save for these unanticipated issues. So,
and this,
again, the check.
Yeah, and this fund, the stabilization fund, can be used for anything as a rainy day, as a last resort.
Correct.
But it's not specialized because we've got $600,000 going to the capital stabilization fund, which I assume can only be used for capital needs.
So all of these stabilization funds, it puts the money into a reserve account, these stabilization funds, which allows us to invest it in a different manner for a higher rate of return. But more importantly, this puts that money allocation in the hands of town meeting because it requires a 2/3 vote to take the money out.
All right.
So 2/3 to put it in and 2/3 to take it out.
Of any of these stabilization.
Of any of these.
So we have the capital, we have two capitals here, right?
We have two capitals, there's two transfers here. So again, the $500,000 gives us the check on our general stabilization account. We've met that objective. The next two, which is the $600,000 and then the approximately $350,000, those go right into the capital stabilization fund. We have a town hall that has some significant structural and safety issues. It needs to be repaired. We have some more technology that we have to do in the community. The town hall, we haven't even painted the town hall. There are a lot of capital needs in this community that have not been addressed over the years. As part of the financial management policies between our internal debt, not excluded debt, but internal debt, and our capital expenditures, we're supposed to have 10% of our operating budget set aside for that. So this is pushing us to that goal.
Still be a little short.
Still short.
Okay.
But
in the right direction.
It's the next item down, Stabilization, check. Capital stabilization, still is in need of funds.
Now the facilities stabilization, how is that different from, you said capital we could use for the town hall work. How is facilities different from that?
Facilities is really structured just for buildings. I mean, the capital could also be an ambulance, it could be a fire engine, it could be vehicles, it could be a rolling stock. It doesn't have to be a building per se. This one just starts to, plug some money into our buildings. What we have, and again, here's a financial issue that we've been trying to address for the last couple of years, is we have our townwide facilities department that maintains all the buildings, and they'll come around and make sure the elevators are inspected. They'll fix like electric sockets, and then we have our capital funds for major items, but we don't have any funds for things that are within the $5 to $10 to $15 to $20,000 range that just fall under short of capital but are too big for a budget line item. This creates a fund for us to go out and do those things. So if we need to do a painting job that's more of a maintenance versus than a long-term capital thing, this gives us a fund to go through there. Again, it has to go to town meeting, but it's starting to set up a budget process that we identify that we have to fund these facility tweener projects.
And this fund, the goal is to get to where?
This one doesn't necessarily have a goal.
Okay. And is this, how much is in there now? We're adding 100,000.
There is nothing in there. Town meeting created the account last year, and it hasn't been funded.
So this is down payment on it.
Correct.
All right. Then we've heard a little about this next one, the 250 going into the post-employment benefits liability program. Problem, we talked about it last time, that I think every municipality in the country, and do I remember 35 million? Is that
$36 million is what our allocation is this year. This is the first year in 2014 where the actual OPEB liability and our budget actually cross. What's going to be happening now is our OPEB is going to continue to grow faster than what our budget is for our accrued liability components. To give you an example, let's see, so we're in 2014 right now. In 2034, I think our projected budget for the town is $58 million, and our OPEB liability will be $98 million. So it starts to spread, and that's assuming nothing is done. The more we do, we close that gap down. So this is a way of addressing that and starting to put more money into this trust fund. By putting it in the trust fund, that actually is invested by the state, which they're required to get an 8.5% return year over year. And it also helps us with our bond rating because we're proactive communities trying to address this liability.
I'd like to get an 8.5% return these days.
We got 16% last year in one of our accounts.
Sweet. DPW, road repairs, $100,000.
Very similar example with facilities is the town, unlike other towns, we don't fund road construction or road repairs. We get an annual allocation from the state called Chapter 90, which comes out of our gas tax, so that reverts back to the communities and for all state roads. And then that's used to come in and repair local roads that we have, but it doesn't cover enough. So this is to put an additional $100,000 into doing additional public road repair so we can start to get ahead of the curve. We're so far behind the curve on our roadways that we need to move forward. If we did not have the massive sewer construction projects that we had all around Little Harbor, a lot of our roads would be in disrepair. But as part of that project, because they dug them up, the roads got rebuilt. All
right. So in those funds now, would that be voted by town meeting as to how to use those 100,000? Or
no, this one does not go into a stabilization account. This one just goes into a DPW road expense line item. And I will tell you that the DPW department is one of our stellar departments. There are a bunch of MacGyvers that they can turn, a $5 into $10 worth of product just because they're very frugal in how they go about doing things. So, they have put together their priority list of roads based upon the current condition of them, and then they start to attack those from the bottom up.
So this 100,000 we would anticipate being spent fairly quickly to get out there and get the work done.
Yes, this would be spent in the spring.
So, all right, and now when this article then is on the town meeting floor, I assume that people can vote to amend it to switch the money around. It's something you're not in favor of, but that can be done, right?
Town meeting can do whatever it chooses to do by majority vote.
Okay. So, so these numbers may be switched around, but your view is that this is a well thought out distribution of these funds based on the plan that was adopted by town meeting.
That is correct. These follow the town meeting's plan, and they've been recommended by the finance team, and I think our team's been doing a good job over the last 2 years.
Has anyone else voted, any of the other committees, advisory, selectmen, any of the other capital budget voted on this yet, or is that still between now and town meeting?
Between now and town meeting.
Okay, all right. You had mentioned, I don't want to forget, that one of the reasons the selectmen, in your mind, of course you're just watching, you're getting in other people's heads, but didn't want to go forward with the town meeting was it might open it up to other citizens' petitions. There was one citizen's petition that I know of, because I saw the gentleman trying to get signatures for it, that had to do, and we'll get into in a little while, the town manager search. Now that fell short. Is that, do I understand
Correct.
that correctly? Okay. Correct. And what was that seeking? What's your understanding?
I haven't fully read it was there, because I've got the notice from the town clerk that this article failed by 4 votes to get it in between the required time. So from that standpoint, I really, it was trying to figure out how to manage the acting town manager and the acting police chief over the next 6 months. How that was going to be done, I didn't really put a lot of time and effort into.
Okay. All right. So then the other articles, they do feel like a little housekeeping, and there was some need. Some, like Article 2 is the Water Commission, and $95,000 for unanticipated expenses. These are the $75,000 for unanticipated expenses for Sewer Commission, Article 3. So those are the kind of articles that we're kind of used to seeing at special town meeting, right?
Correct. However, with Article 2 and 3, and they're very similar in that except for the dollar amount, is both the Water and the Sewer Commission actually had retained earnings this year of $400,000. Now remember, a couple years ago, the Water Commission had a negative cash flow, and town meeting had to come in for one article special town meeting and to transfer, free or stabilization money in to balance out the water department. So once they pay off these other items, the 95 and the 75 for the water and sewer respectively, is the rest of the money they want to put into their own stabilization accounts. So here you have the water capital stabilization account, you have the sewer capital stabilization account, and the sewer debt stabilization fund. So the same thing with Article 1 is these commissions have a couple expenses they have to pay for that they need to do this year, additional repairs, and then they want to take the
rest of the retained
revenue,
earnings,
take it out of the checking account, because that's where it's at, and we know what the interest rate that is, and put it into their stabilization accounts.
So when you said 400,000, is that the profit, so-called, of the water and sewer combined?
Each
have 400,000?
Yeah, about 404 and 406.
Close. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
And again, think of where we were a few years ago.
Right.
That wasn't the case. They were in the, one was in the red.
So they're saying, here's my 400,000. Water is saying, I want to take 95, then use it for some unanticipated expenses, and the remaining 305, I want to put in my stabilization, and the same thing, which is the slightly different numbers. All right.
Correct.
All right, and then now Article 4 deals with the problem, having sat on several boards myself, and I know you have too, which can be an issue, which is when a hearing goes on for many sessions, if you miss one session, then you can't vote.
Correct.
And the state, as I read this, has now said that's getting a little crazy. If you only miss one, you can only miss one. Is that it, or you can miss?
I believe it's one.
I think to miss a single session, right?
Yep.
So if you don't miss one of the sessions, as long as you certify that you've gone back, maybe listened to the tape, read the material, and so forth, that you've educated yourself on what happened at the session you missed, you may still vote.
Correct.
Okay.
And this one's being sponsored by Woody Chittick, is the one that's been forwarding this. And in essence, just like you said, if you miss one meeting, if you want to vote, you have to go do some homework, learn what you missed that meeting, certify you've done it, and then you're able to vote.
Right.
So this is a something that's been talked about for a little while, and we had this opportunity to move it forward. The next 3 articles are more or less just housekeeping articles.
Yeah.
And these are all recommended by the treasurer collector. One is so that the treasurer collector has the legal authority to do direct deposit. Believe it or not, we have to accept the state statute to do that. I will say the town's been breaking the law for a while because we never accepted the statute. We've been paying people direct deposit. She noticed this and she goes, wait a minute, time out. I'm still going to pay people direct deposit, but let's just
legitimize it.
Legitimize it.
Right, right. And then, yeah, the outstanding checks, we get to keep them as opposed to give them to the state if people don't cash out checks,
Yep.
as I understand it.
And if you don't pay your bills, then you can have your permits held over a certain time period.
So that's it. So it looks like, to the extent that there's going to be much activity at all, it's going to revolve around the first article.
And I have yet to see anyone come back with anything to make a proposal that would be more beneficial to the town than what's here.
Now, I know the selectmen, I thought, had preliminarily talked about, well, should it be distributed this way, but no firm, well, let's rejigger it. You haven't seen any of that.
The only thing that one person mentioned was, let's put it all into the OPED. Well, we have to solve our OPED issues, but we also have a couple other things that are, on our financial management policies that need to be addressed as well.
Yeah, and the OPED numbers are scary to look at, but the reality is all that money, the 35 now and whatever it goes, it's not, we don't have to pay that next year. That's spread out over time.
Correct.
And while you got to focus on it, the sky's not falling in on us. We just have to pay attention to it and try to bring it under control to the extent we can, right? I mean,
we can, and we have an OPED commission that's been looking at this, a bunch of very intelligent individuals. We actually had an OPED meeting at 7:30 this morning, which is really great when you're starting with the actuarians at 7:30. It wakes you up real quick. But you're absolutely right. This is an accrued liability based upon commitments the town has made for its current employees. And based upon those commitments today, it's going to cost you X over until they die.
Right.
So that X is a lot of money. But again, you're paying an element of that every year. So it is a large number, but there are ways of addressing this. And I will say with this transfer of the $250,000, I would say that we're in the top 10% in the state, if not maybe even the top 5% of the state, that's actually moving forward in a proactive way, addressing our OPED, and actually that will reflect in our bond rating.
well, and you talked about the bond rating. A lot of this is focused on the bond rating. What is our rating now?
Our rating, we just got an upgrade, and our rating right now is a AA+ with a stable outlook. So the next
With a what look?
Stable.
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 Stable outlook, okay.
Yep. The next rating is a AAA. That's the next step up. We only have one more notch to go, and that's what it is.
And that's AAA that's it. There's no AAA plus or
There's
5
AAA
star.
is the
AAA is the gold standard.
The gold standard, and when you're at a AAA community, you see significant benefits for whenever you have to do any borrowing, because your interest rates will be lower, because investors want to invest in a stable community that they know is going to be able to pay its bills. Detroit doesn't have a AAA.
No, they don't.
And not that we're ever going to be Detroit, but the point is that particularly as municipalities may not start to address their OPED, may have other financial issues, their bond ratings will go down and ours will go up with making these continued sound investments, and then therefore we should be able to borrow at a better rate. And plus, it's not only is it the gold standard, but it also demonstrates that your financial house is in order.
Now, when is the next review, or of the bond rating? Is that something that we know when it's going to come, or is it periodic? Or?
Our next review is going to be sometime in the spring, because we've got a bunch of short-term debt that we may roll over, and I think a lot of it depends also on what the town does with town meeting. We could roll our debt over a little bit longer in delay going out for permanent financing. because you don't want to go out for permanent financing for $200,000.
Right.
Because $200,000 and $2 million cost you about the same, to hire, a bond counsel and everything to go through that.
Right.
So you want to have a mass there to go out and do it, and then when you do that, then you go forward with the rating.
So do you think by the spring that we might be able to end up with a AAA, or do you think we're another year from that?
The rating agencies are slow to move. What they want to see is they want to see communities that do what they say they're going to do. And they can't, they need more than 6 months or 12 months to generally see that. They want to, so with our financial management policies, if all of a sudden we're not following them, then, you get the big X mark.
So they want to see a little track record.
Correct. But if you're following your policies and they like our policies, and you're continuing to make reform and you're getting good audit reports, and we just won another award for our audits, that there's a high likelihood that we should be able to get the AAA rating within about a year to maybe a year and a half, maybe 2 years. I mean, it's really tough to move up that last notch, but financially this town's doing everything that it needs to do to go in that direction.
All right, well, let's shift over to some other current events down at Town Hall. And I guess the search for the police chief and search for a full-time town manager are kind of the big issues out there. Let's start with the police chief search, because that, and again, just looking at it, reading the papers and hearing people talk, I'm a little confused as to, frankly, why you went in the direction you did. Not Bill Quigley. I mean, I think, I didn't hear anything negative about Bill. I heard everyone very positive about him. But the selectmen had told you, at least, and correct me if I'm wrong, but they basically said, we don't want to have a new permanent police chief. Now, we want to wait until we get a full-time town manager before we go forward. And yet, having been told that,
well, let me correct you there.
That's what I want.
The board never said that.
You didn't have that understanding?
The board did not ever say that. No.
Okay.
No.
All right.
And the history of it is that, as we know, we had to let a contract run out on a former chief.
Yep.
And during that time, the deputy chief, Bill Quigley, was serving as the acting chief.
Right.
Things were running fine. Things were getting, performance was improving in the department. Morale was high. The capital budget and the finance advisory teams were happy because there was transparency. There were no issues in the department. So in January, I went to the board and says, it's been X number of, almost a year at that time. And I said, I'd like to go forward, and I plan on appointing Bill, as my responsibility. I mean, I've appointed the treasurer collector twice. I've appointed director of project management, our health agent, our chief technology officer. I mean, these are all positions that I was appointing. The fire chief, and reappointed him, and I said, I need to go forward and appoint Bill, and here's why, and I laid out my case. And the direction was, the thought was, well, you know what, let's go out and do a search. But when you do the search, put in there that you have a strong internal candidate that's currently running the department. That was put into the first advertisement. It went out to every police department in Massachusetts. I didn't want to hire somebody from Tennessee or Roswell, New Mexico, or whatever, because those state laws are different than Massachusetts state laws. I wanted to have somebody from Massachusetts. And I put in there, as they suggested, a strong internal candidate. Well, what happened is a few weeks later, after it had already gone forward, is the board then decided, well, we don't like that. We want to change that. And so they asked to cancel the search. So we canceled the search, and then we brought in a police search advisor. And he came in and he says, listen, the first thing you need to do is look at your department. Is it running well? Yes. Okay, so look in there for internal candidates. Or if you don't have an internal candidate in there, what is it you want to change by bringing in an external candidate? Where are the problems with the department? No one ever articulated a problem with the department. So in the second search, we went out and advertised it. They wanted to have a national search. So we advertised it in monster.com. We put it in the print advertisement of the Boston Globe. and half a dozen other vehicles that were out there to spread the word around. And that was approved by the board, so I laid out the process. A couple weeks later, they came back and says, well, we want to reconsider our vote. We've already spent a couple $1,000s going out and doing this, and now you want to reconsider your vote. It's your choice. So they voted to reconsider their vote.
Now, is this all the old board? Is the election hasn't happened yet?
This is after the election.
Okay, so when did the election happen? Was that?
Between the two.
Between the two, okay.
Search 1 and Search 2.
Okay. And now Search 2 has gone out, but
National
they've said,
Search.
no, okay.
Whole new boards on there. The Search was, it was a 3-2 to go forward and do the National Search.
Yeah.
And then it was asked to come back for reconsideration. Well, the board, in reconsidering it, voted against doing the search now, so they stopped the search.
Okay.
Now, the thing is, the Board of Selectmen are not in charge of a search. That's not their roles and responsibilities as part of our Town Manager Act. Their role and responsibility is to reject an appointment made by the town manager within 15 days. So no direction has been provided, no ultimatums, no nothing at that point. They just said, we stopped the search. And I asked again, is there anything else that you want? No, we've stopped the search. Okay, so you've stopped your search. So then I went for a third search, and I went internally into the department, and I went through all the sergeants and the lieutenants and everything, just to make sure no one else was interested in the position. The ideal candidate, was either the chief or the detective lieutenant that has the most experience and knows how to manage divisions. And the detective lieutenant clearly says, no, I'm not interested. I want to support Bill Quigley. And after discussing that, I discussed it with town council. I discussed it with the chairman on numerous times. And then finally I said, listen, this is not fair to the community. It's not fair to the police department. They've been over a year without a chief. We have a qualified person. I need to go forward and just appoint Bill. If we're not going to do any searches, then I need to appoint a chief to go forward. And that's what I did.
So when the selectmen reconsidered the second search,
yes,
if I'm understanding, you went back to them and said, okay, well, again, you didn't have to, but they're saying they didn't want to do it, and so you say, all right, fine, we won't do it, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, you could have said, no,
right,
I'm going forward, but you decided, no, we'll stop it. What was your sense as to what the majority of the board wanted to have happen with the police chief position?
I was getting mixed signals. I had people that didn't like him. I had people that wanted to change the process. I was getting signals all across the board. And for the integrity of the employee in the position, in my judgment, I needed to move forward to make an appointment. And at the end of the day, they can reject the appointment, which is what they did. But I was getting mixed signals as to why they did or did not want him, and I felt it was important for the community to take that step.
See, I think what's hard for some folks to understand is, you're there, you're in your little chair, and they're up there, and everyone can talk to everybody, and how there can be the mixed signals, the lack of communication, where you're not really sure what they want. I mean, is it you? Is it them? Is it both of you? I mean, why is this? Why can't people talk to each other and make it clear? Because I think in the end, Bill's the loser. Bill got nominated by you, and he got rejected by the selectmen, and that's not a good thing.
Yep.
And it felt like, and I heard nothing negative about Bill. Everyone likes Bill. From what I could tell. Now, maybe you've heard other things.
See, I was hearing different things.
All right, and that it was
group.
Process. I mean, I know when the selectmen rejected the appointment, I don't think any of them said anything negative about Bill publicly.
Publicly.
Okay, that's why I want to make sure. But they talked about process. And it just seemed like it seemed like you should have known, but you're saying you didn't, that if you nominated Bill, he was going to be rejected. And if that was the case, then I said, well, why bother? Why put him through that? Why not just wait and do it the way that no one could complain about the process?
I'd already done it twice the way the Board of Selectmen recommended doing the process. So to say you can do it with no one complaining about the process, we followed their process on 2 different occasions. And then they complained about their own process. And that was what was unfair to Bill. That was where the issue was. And, you know, of course, before I nominated Bill, you know, I said, I'm planning to nominate you and here's why. You know, do you want me to go forward with this, or do you want to withdraw your name? And he was all on board to go forward with it because he knew he was the best candidate for the position. The communications, you know, there's some selectmen that, since they've been elected, have yet to come in and meet with me. So I don't know what else I can do but to invite them in, time and time again. But if they choose not to come in and meet with the town manager, what more can I do to communicate? But so the communication, the only communication, is at that 2-hour meeting, you know, every other Tuesday.
You've asked them to come in and talk. Hey, can't we sit down and talk these things through? You've made that effort?
Multiple emails, phone calls, etc.
So when you went forward with your nomination of Bill, did you expect that he would be confirmed, or did you anticipate that it wasn't going to happen? Because from the side, it looked like it was doomed. You know, there was a 3-2 vote there, and there wasn't any shock. And but I mean, and if that's the case, then why would you go forward with it when it's just going to lose? Why not work it a little harder and maybe hope that things change and the vote would go the other way?
The department was out of chief for what, almost a year and a half?
What difference does that make? I mean, Bill's up, he's acting chief, doing a great job from all I can tell, and I think what everyone else has said. The fact that he's acting as opposed to, I mean, you can speak for yourself, as opposed to a full-time, what difference does it really make at the end of the day? I mean, if the goal is to get him to be chief, why can't he be acting chief for another 6 months? He's getting paid the same amount, right?
I think there's a different issue when you're looking at it from a public safety department, because those jobs for police officers are transferable. They can become a police officer in another town because they're already trained. So for them, having the stability of knowing who's going to be running their department in the long run is important to them. And I will say right now, we have a very good group of officers that are working for Cohasset, in Cohasset's best interest, that have, you know, some high degrees, that have significant experience, and you don't hear any problems with the Cohasset Police Department. I don't want us to lose 3, 4, 5 people because they don't know who's going to be running their department.
So you were concerned that he had to be put up because if he continued to just be acting, you might actually lose police officers?
That was one of the reasons, yes.
Right. And when you put him up, you thought that he would be
I did think and had hoped that there and thought and that there would be some reconsideration that was going on. I mean, after all, the board was making a decision one day and then changing the decision the next day. You know, that was what was happening on this whole issue.
So now, where are we? Are you going to come forward with anything else on the police chief in the near future, or we'll just have Bill stay in as acting until? After
this last vote to reject it, the board was clear after this one that they did not want to, they were not going to reconsider this until they had a new town manager.
All right.
So at that point, now there's direction that we're not going to accept anything you're going to send, so now it would be fruitless to send them a name, where they never did that before.
All right. So yeah, I had thought that message was out there before you went forward, but you're saying, no, you were getting these mixed signals and you really didn't know how they would turn out as far as the confirmation vote.
That is correct.
Okay. Now,
it's not like this town doesn't live on rumors here and there.
Yeah. Oh yes. Well, that's one of the reasons we're here is to get that squared away. Now, let's move to the town manager permanent job. Mm-hmm. You're under contract through the rest of this calendar year, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And again, there's been a stop and start a little on the town manager search. Bring us back a little to the most current. We don't want to go through ancient history. It's too painful. Let's just go from what we're doing now and how that started, as far as the search process.
The Board of Selectmen hired the Collins Center from UMass. to come in and run the search process for them. They're not going to have a screening committee. They've asked the Collins Center to submit 3 to 5 qualified names based upon the criteria that they gave them, and to bring those names forward to the Board of Selectmen. Once they have those names, then they'll start an interview process.
And do I understand that the names could be any day now that the names would be coming out?
Supposedly they're going to be sometime in November.
Sometime in November. Oh, not,
Correct.
I thought it was like early November, but who knows?
I do not know what the date's going to be.
And we don't know whether it's 3, 4, 5.
We do not.
Is your name going to be one of them?
I have made it publicly known that I did apply.
Okay. Now, one of the issues with your application had to do with the old, I'm not sure it's old yet, but the Town Manager Act. Town meeting voted to amend it. Those amendments would have permitted you or people in your, coming from the committees like you were without the, what was it, 1 year away, make them eligible to be appointed. That was voted at town meeting, went up to Beacon Hill. There was hearings, opposition, support, and a lot of where is the bill? Last I heard, it was seen to be moving forward. What's the latest?
The last that I had heard was that it's in the Senate, so it's passed the House.
It's passed the House.
It's in the Senate, waiting to go through its readings and committee approval. And then once that's happened, then they'll have it. It'll be for joint approval, and then the governor will sign it.
All right. And are there any hearings in the Senate? Any more opportunities for people, the opposing sides, to get up there, or are they just going forward, or do you know?
I do not know that.
Okay. And so what is Garrett and Bob Hedlund, what are they predicting as far as a timeline, to the extent you can predict these things?
I haven't been involved in that. I know town council's been involved in that. I think town council has a view on whether either one applies or they both apply for this search process.
Okay, you may have jumped ahead of me. So as far as the timing of when the governor will sign the new act into law, when do we think that'll be?
Well, I don't have a date.
Don't know. Okay. And let's assume, because the search process is moving forward, your contract's ending at the end of December, if that new statute, which is I think what you just answered, if that new law is not signed by the governor by the time it is time to appoint a full-time town manager, are you eligible to be considered or not?
That's a town council question, and I think he's already opined on that.
And assume that I don't know what that opinion is.
Again, my name is in the pool.
Okay, so he has, I mean, I assume the opinion is public, is it not?
I don't know what he's advised.
Oh, you don't know what
no,
he's
I
advised,
don't.
just a selectman.
That's correct.
So you don't know
Yes.
whether or not.
I mean, I know that what is public is that he has told them that they can extend my contract.
Right. But you don't know what he said as far as your eligibility under the old or existing
Correct.
Town Manager Act. All right. And has there, I mean, let's face reality, with the Board of the Selectmen set up the way they are, they're not going to extend your contract, are they?
It's up to them.
I mean, I certainly don't get the feeling that you'd be willing to do that, though, have an extension of your contract?
They haven't offered me anything.
Okay, all right. And so the three to five will be recommended sometime this month. And let's jump ahead. So we've got the 3 to 5 candidates. Maybe you're one, maybe you're not. What happens then?
Then they'll have an interview process. They'll probably
Just the selectmen, because there's no separate committee.
Correct.
All right.
Maybe they'll have 2 rounds of an interview process. I don't know. They haven't made that decision.
Right.
I'm sure they're going to do a background check, a criminal background. They might do a psych evaluation. That's what we do for all new hires in the police department.
Yeah.
You know, whatever it is they end up doing, that'll be something that will determine, you know, how long it takes them to offer a job to someone.
All right. And will the interviews all be public, or just the final interviews, or how will that work? Do you know?
Because they're not having a screening committee, they've hired Collins Center to be their screening committee. There will be no private interviews.
All right. So
They're all
these
public.
folks who oftentimes are town managers already, their town's going to know that they're one of 5 finalists maybe for this job.
Correct.
Whereas in the past, my memory is that normally that would be kind of kept secret unless you were the last 1 or 2. But
there would be a round of maybe 10 interviews, and then the committee would nominate 3 or 5 out of that as the finalist, and then those 3 or 5 would then be public interviews with the selectmen. So again, they've skipped that first step. They've hired Collins Center to do the initial screening.
All right. And
there is no local screening for that first pool.
So the rest of the timeline will be set up once we get the names, is that it?
I believe so. They may even be discussing that tomorrow night.
Okay, all right. Because I suppose you said it could be sometime in November. If it's tomorrow, it's one thing. If it's the 29th of November, it's another, I suppose. But they do want to move forward with it. Is that fair to say, your impression?
That is correct,
there?
yes.
Okay, all right. There was also another town manager who came in to talk to the selectmen.
Yes.
Tell me a little about that.
Well, what I identified was that immediately after the election is that when I was trying to sit down with the Board of Selectmen and talk about their FY14 goals, what do they want to accomplish this year, we couldn't get to any consensus. So I made a recommendation is, why don't we have a facilitator come in that can actually facilitate amongst the 5 members of the Board of Selectmen to try to figure out what is the consensus and where do you want to take the town from a policy standpoint. And the individual that they hired at the end of the day was Jeff Nutting. Jeff Nutting is the town manager in Franklin. He has also been a selectman in other communities. He has written on this subject for almost 2 decades and is published as well as trying to identify what the role is of the policy board versus the role of the management. And we had about a 3-hour session that was over at the Lake Keepers Inn where he went through and told them, he says, listen, the selectmen have 3 roles, 3 jobs. First is they hire a town manager. Second is they set policy. And the third is for things that can't be resolved at a lower level. And only then do the selectmen get involved as the option of last resort to adjudicate, if you want, an issue. He says those are the 3 roles of selectmen. And so he spent several hours going over that and trying to work with them on articulating what their goals are.
Did you feel that it was a successful session?
I think it was a very successful session, very enlightening to, I think, a lot of people. And I'm still hopeful that we will start to see some benefit of that session.
I mean, what you just pointed out, the roles of the selectmen, that's kind of 101, isn't it? I mean, isn't that kind of basic stuff?
Yes.
Did we pay this gentleman?
We did.
How much did we pay him?
It was a couple $1,000s. No, actually it wasn't even, it was less than $1,000.
So we paid him $1,000 to come in to tell all of you, I guess, you too, right? I mean, you were part of this.
I was part of it, but I think it's whenever you have a board of directors, if you will, which is with selectmen, you generally always have a retreat. You generally always hire a facilitator to figure out what is the objectives of this organization for the upcoming year and beyond that. So whether it was $1,000 or you had to spend more money to get a team of facilitators in, it's money well spent because it actually helps put together a message and an objective of where people want to head, and they collectively agree upon that and then move forward.
So even though this board and several previous boards are viewed by some as being dysfunctional, what I'm hearing you say is this is something that should happen no matter how well the board is working together. It's just a good thing to do every once in a while.
Yes, and one of the selectmen actually made a motion or a suggestion at the end of the session that we need to do this on an annual basis.
Okay.
Whether it's with Jeff or not, we need to have this exercise on an annualized basis.
Okay. All right. Well, so then looking at the town, the state of the town, you feel at this point is pretty darn good.
Well, I mean, let's go through that, and let's start with the finances of the town. When I came into the town, we had a projected deficit of $600,000 over appropriated budget. We were able to reverse that. We were able to put together these financial management policies, which has been, if you will, our objective to get out of the financial, and operational chaos that things were in. We've increased our stabilization. We've set up our capital, increased our capital stabilization. We established an OPED trust fund. We improved our bond rating. We hired a new auditing firm and did our first CAFA. We just won a national award for that transparent audit document. We've gone forward and had the Mass Department of Revenue come in and do a financial management report on the town and identified what we need to improve on. All of those things from a financial standpoint are going very well. Looking at the enterprise funds, we were able to go out and rebid and get a new water management company to come in, and that saved the ratepayers, well, it saved the commission about $1.3 million over 3 years just in the engineering fees that we were paying for the plant operator. We now have a strong working relationship between the Water and the Sewer Commission and the town manager, where I'm using my role as joint management with them, and we're collaborating on everything that's come out of them, demonstrated by the $400,000 in surplus revenue or retained earnings that came out of the Water and Sewer Commission. With our increased bond rating, we went out and did 2 refinancings. One is we saved the taxpayer $1.25 million in reduced interest and debt service expenses. That was on excluded debt. That doesn't come back to the town. That's $1.25 million that we are not going to bill the taxpayers over the next 11 years to pay out that. So that was a direct savings to the taxpayers. So from a financial standpoint, things are going very well. Now looking at operations, we've increased service delivery in the library. They have a new teen librarian that's down there, and we've now made sure that the library is funded at the state requirement so we can get state grants. That's happened 2 years in a row now. Moving on from the library, the harbor master has adequate support staff for her summertime activity. We've increased her services down there. DPW, we've actually added a personnel so that DPW can help do what they do best around town, and they were 1 person short within their street program. The schools, we met the schools initial target number for operating the schools. There have been no fights between the school and the town over the last couple of years. I mean, that's going well. And then you go through other departments. Elder Affairs service delivery has dramatically changed this year because they restructured how the staff arrangement was, where they now have full-time employees that are able to just provide that much more service and support to their constituents.
What about morale at Town Hall? Is that, what is your sense on that? I
would say the morale with the departments in the Town Hall is very high. I will say that certainly there's some union officials that felt that they didn't get all the pay raises and all the benefits that they wanted, but that's to be expected. But the morale with the department heads that are running the town on the day-to-day basis, I will say, is very high. And look at some other initiatives that we've done. We've now centralized our permanent inspection departments. We've now pulled the conservation office down into the building department, working with the planning office, now doing the Board of Health work down in the building office, and so that now any resident doesn't have to hop between room to room. They can come to that one central office and get a Concom, planning, Board of Health, or building permit, or any of the electrical or plumbing inspections, all within that one office, because it's now open every hour the town hall's open.
You mentioned that you had some concerns about morale at the police department. I mean, what about the police and fire department, the rank and file? Do you feel the morale's in a good place?
I think that the police, again, I think are still just trying to figure out what their future is. So I think that that's an issue. I don't think morale is bad, but I think there's a big question mark out there that they're just patiently observing. The fire department seems to be running well. No issues with the fire department. When I came on board here, I had to resolve, I think it was 2 unfair labor practices and 4 or 5 grievances from the town manager that served here 6 months. I've resolved all those at no cost to the town. One's still pending in court, but it's not a financial impact.
And no new ones.
No one's filed anything against me. Again, let's go to the rumors.
Yeah.
Let's go to the rumors. I mean, the facts are what they are.
Right.
Let's go to the rumors. Some people, may complain, but again, there's nothing to back it up.
Been filed.
So the last point I want to make about just the service delivery of all these departments is that all of this has occurred without us asking for any overrides, without us, trying to. They're all developed through operational efficiencies and some consolidation or reorganization. So again, we're saving this money in our stabilization funds. That's a great thing. Normally somebody say, well, what are you cutting back? We're not cutting back anything. We're actually expanding the level of service. We're getting rid of inefficiencies, no doubt about that. But savings, more service delivery with
Mike,
no increased taxes.
You paint a very bright picture of your time as acting town manager here, but it certainly appears that you do not have the support of the majority of the Board of Selectmen. So why is that? If everything is gone as well, and as you've stated, and you've laid out the facts and so forth, why is it that a majority of the Board of Selectmen, frankly, don't support you? I mean, call a spade a spade. What's your sense?
That's a good question. That's a political question that they'll have to answer.
All right. Well, thank you for coming on board tonight. You've helped us understand what's coming up on the town warrant. I hope everyone gets up to town meeting, even though it may not be the most exciting town meeting. All this hard work and we don't get a quorum would not be a good situation. So get in and vote these issues, vote these articles the way you feel they should be voted. And hopefully we've also helped people get up to date on all that's going on at down at Town Hall. So again, thank you very much for coming in.
Very welcome.
And thank you everyone for watching. Until next time, I'm Mark DeGiacomo. Good night.